It is Thursday, November 14th, about 9:30 in the morning. Make sure nobody's coming running behind us. As you can see, it's kind of rainy, but it's still beautiful out here. There's just a little blurb of rain that's kind of hovering and it's supposed to pass, but it rained a lot yesterday. But it's still beautiful, and I wanted to get Sam out because as I check in, I am not in a great headspace going into the holidays. But I thought I would make a morning devotion, a doggies in devotion. I'm going to start with this. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, and thy will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Everybody always throws another forever. I don't think that's in the Bible, but I love it. Halton-Z. And that prayer, beside this meeting, has such a special place in my heart, and it always has. And I would always recite it every time I was out hiking with the dogs or just out in nature. I usually recite it once or twice a day. And then I don't know, if it'll show, but this little ring, yeah, it will, and it spins. The writing on that little ring is the Lord's Prayer. I got that in Tennessee at a Dollar General in, what was that little town we used to go to? I'm drawing a blank, but there was an addiction program from over near Pigeon Forge, and of course, as I researched it, it was very, very money-based, and I heard they make their folks in rehab go out and sell their wares, but I think some of the stuff was homemade, but they had t-shirts and jewelry and inspirational signs and stuff. And anyway, I met a couple cool kids there from time to time, and then one time I purchased this ring because I fell in love with it, with the meaning. And but another reason the Lord's Prayer is so special for me is I learned it in 3rd grade, so I would have been 8 years old. And I learned it through a very special means involving my amazing, beautiful soul of a grandmother, Marcella. And that was my dad's mom. She lived on the north end, on the very last street of our tiny town of 300. Our little tiny town in east central Indiana was, there was a main State Road 36, actually US 36, because oddly enough, I lived off 36 in Boulder, or in Estes Park when I lived out in Colorado after college. But, and Dad and his buddies, we had a really cool picture of him on 36 way out. I think it was in Colorado. He and some buddies one time just drove it. I guess they were in high school, just to see how far it went. And that was kind of cool. But anyway, so we had one light, a red light and a caution light, which I grew up calling it a caution light because that's what everybody else called it. So my best friend and fraternity brother in college, John, who's now a minister in Columbus, Ohio, always gives me a hard time because I think the first time I said it, he's like, what the hell's a caution light? And I swear I never knew any difference. It was so funny because that is just what I grew up thinking it was called. The little dialect in our tiny little town of Sulphur Springs, Indiana was unique. Anyway, and then there were 1, 2, 3, I guess 3 north-south streets on our end of town and 2 east-west streets, and then on my grandma's end of town there would have been, I think, 5 north-south streets and 2 east-west streets. So anyway, she lived on the far north end. And then back in the day, we had one of the old high schools that kind of remind me of all the Carnegie libraries that exist today. And like in Greenfield, Indiana, they have a restaurant called Carnegie's, and it's in an old library. But it was that style. Three stories, old brick, very typical for towns of that time. And that happened to be my parents' high school. And then we had 3 other little communities, all consolidated. And when they built our middle and high school out in the cornfields. But anyway, I went to elementary school there, which is kind of cool because you could go. Actually, when you kindergarten, first, second, and third were on the first level, and then fourth and fifth were in the top. The fifth graders actually came over from a little town called Caddis because they didn't have fifth grade. And then we all moved on in sixth grade. But up on that second floor were all the old composites of our parents' high school classes. So mom's was kind of cool. I think there was only 12. And then dad's had, I don't know, maybe 20. But I always got to see those. So directly across from the school was the beautiful Sulphur Springs Christian Church. Now, it may have been Church of Christ at that time, because I know at one time it was affiliated with the Church of Christ and United Church of Christ. But of course, they seceded and went independent when Church of Christ condoned and accepted homosexuality. And even in the clergy, so they're independent now. Anyway, it was a beautiful, beautiful little church. I remember right across from our school steps were the steps that led up and had this entrance and had this tiny little bell tower, and it was narrow. It was right on the alley. My uncle and aunt lived, well, my aunt still lives on that alley. But it's where my parents got married, and we had a cool picture of them on the front steps, and because my grandmother was just a staple to that church. And on Wednesday afternoons, the church ladies had what they called children's meeting, and I was a part of children's meeting. So we would go over after school, and they would teach us Bible stories and teach us the goodness of the world before we would someday find out how crazy it was when you leave the confines of our tiny little village. Our town could have been Pleasantville, if you've ever seen that movie with Reese Witherspoon. I love it when she's in class and they say, "What's at the end of Main Street?" Well, I think that was Maple Street or some other Main Street. And what's at the end of Maple Street? Well, Main Street. And Reese says, "But what's at the end of those?" And there's just like a hush, and everybody turns and looks at her, and they have no concept what she's asking. And then the teacher says, "Well, that's the beginning of Main Street." So that was our little town. But the one piece that I will forever ever remember is my grandmother Marcella teaching me the Lord's Prayer, and sitting there in our tiny little chairs that they had. And then I forget what you got. I think we were rewarded with something once we finished a project. Let's say in reciting the Lord's Prayer, maybe we got a bookmark or something. But it was just really, really a cool program. I'm getting a little emotional here. And again, my grandmother was just such a special soul. I'll have to tell my coming out story with her sometime, because it was very different than that of my family, my parents and then my sister. Her reaction was about like my brother. It's like, next. But anyway, so every time I recite the Lord's Prayer, which is so very often, and believe me, I think about each verse as I go through, because it just is a very beautiful prayer with such beautiful, simple meaning. And but every time I recite it, I see myself in that little chair in front of my grandma. So I know when she or when I am reciting that, she is just right here with me, holding my arm, or I'm sitting there in front of her. And I just love that memory. Whoops, he's gonna climb a tree. Come on, come on. Good try. He's gonna get a squirrel. Sorry, buddy. But that is why the Lord's Prayer, again, besides the just very special meaning of the prayer itself, but that is why it is so dear and so precious to me. I am so grateful for that woman, and she was such a blessing to us and our family. And as I go into the holidays struggling, I just think about her more and more, and can't wait to be with her again. But yeah, so let's finish with one more recitation. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. Thank you, Grandma, for helping me learn that beautiful prayer and poem. I love and miss you.